Most nations, they're defined by something solid, right? A shared border, a single landmass. But what if a nation was defined by its own impossibility? A giant, sprawling, fragmented country that, on paper, really shouldn't exist. Yet it does. And it's not just existing, it's a rising global power. This is the story of Indonesia.
To even begin to get a handle on Indonesia, you first have to wrap your head around its sheer scale. We're talking about more than 17,000 islands. Some are just tiny specks of sand, others are bigger than whole countries in Europe. They're all scattered like jewels across the equator, forming this crucial bridge between two massive oceans and two continents. And living on these islands is a mind-boggling kaleidoscope of humanity. Just think about this. Over 700 distinct languages are spoken here. That's a level of linguistic diversity that is just staggering. Each language holds its own culture, its own unique way of seeing the entire world.
So, that brings us to the central puzzle, the big question of the Indonesian story. How on earth do you forge one single national identity from this incredible, sprawling tapestry of islands, peoples, and languages? Well, the answers aren't simple. They're written in the land itself, they echo through its history, and they live in the spirit of its people.
It all really starts with the ground beneath their feet. Indonesia wasn't just built on land. It was born from this constant, violent, but also beautiful dance between creation and destruction.
See, the entire archipelago sits right on top of the most volatile geological feature on our planet, the Pacific Ring of Fire. Now, this isn't just some line on a map. It is the very engine of life and death that has shaped every single aspect of Indonesia.
And what's causing all this volatility? It's a colossal, slow-motion collision. Deep beneath these islands, three of the Earth's massive tectonic plates, the Eurasian, the Indo-Australian, and the Pacific, are constantly grinding against each other. And that immense, unending pressure makes the whole region tremble with earthquakes and just simmer with raw volcanic power.
And the result of all that pressure? Around 130 active volcanoes. A literal chain of fire that stretches all the way from Sumatra in the west to the Banda Islands in the east. This is a place where people live every day with a constant reminder of the planet's awesome power.
But here's the amazing paradox. That very same volcanic ash that can bring so much destruction, well, it also brings life. It creates some of the most incredibly fertile soil you can find anywhere on Earth, soil that has supported huge populations for centuries, especially on islands like Java and Bali. Destruction and creation, they're forever tangled together here.
So, if the land is this mosaic of volcanic islands, it makes sense that its society is an equally complex mosaic of cultures. And that raises a huge question. How do you unite all that diversity? The answer, it turns out, lies in a uniquely Indonesian way of thinking.
Okay, so let's break it down. The Javanese are the largest ethnic group, making up about 40% of the population, and they hold a lot of political influence. But do the math. That leaves a huge majority, 60%, spread out across hundreds of other distinct groups, from the Sundanese in West Java to the indigenous peoples of Papua.
And the religious landscape is just as layered. Indonesia is by far the world's most populous Muslim-majority country. Over 87% of its people follow Islam. But it's also home to tens of millions of Christians and has these really important Hindu and Buddhist communities, especially in places like Bali.
So how do you manage all of this? Well, Indonesia relies on this unique state ideology called Pancasila. It's built on 5 principles, things like belief in one God and social justice for everyone. It's basically a framework that officially welcomes and protects pluralism. You could call it the philosophical glue that's meant to hold the entire nation together. And this whole idea is captured perfectly in the national motto, which comes from an old Javanese poem, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. It translates to unity in diversity. And believe me, this is way more than just a slogan, it's the nation's core operating system.
Of course, this kind of unity, it didn't just happen overnight. Not at all. It was forged in the fire of centuries of empire, colonialism, and a long, hard fight for independence.
Indonesia's path to becoming a nation was long, and it was tough. It started with these amazing maritime empires like Srivijaya and Majapahit that once ruled the region. Then came over 300 years of Dutch colonial rule. That period finally ended with the hard-won proclamation of independence in 1945. But the struggle wasn't over. It continued through an authoritarian period called the New Order and has now come into the democratic reformasi era of today.
And that shift in recent history has been dramatic.
On the one hand, you had the new order under Suharto. It brought decades of fast economic growth, but it came at a huge cost. Political freedom was crushed. Then, in 1998, everything changed. Student-led protests kicked off the Reformasi era, bringing in democracy and giving more power to the regions. But it also brought a whole new set of really complex economic and political challenges.
So where does all of this leave Indonesia right now? Well, it's standing tall as a rising power on the world stage, but its future, just like its past, is held in a really delicate balance.
I mean, make no mistake, Indonesia today is an economic powerhouse. It's got the biggest economy in all of Southeast Asia, and it has a seat at the big table. It's a member of the G20 group of major economies. Its influence around the world is growing every single year.
But, and this is a big but, it faces some immense challenges. You've got huge environmental pressures from things like deforestation. Economic growth is still really uneven, creating this big gap between the richer Western islands and the developing East. And through it all, that fundamental challenge is always there. How do you build the roads, the ports, the networks, and maintain unity across this gigantic, fragmented nation?
And so, we come back to that central question. Can this impossible archipelago, this nation born from volcanic fire, defined by the sea, and built from 1,000 different cultures, can it handle the intense pressures of the 21st century without fracturing? The answer isn't just going to shape the future for 250 million people. It might just hold some really important lessons for a world that's also struggling to figure out how to live with its own incredible diversity.